His banker friends in Washington may think that they have fiscal space, but the single mothers who can't afford groceries have no space left at all to pay for liberal inflation.
We will take no lessons from these conservatives. Trust me on that, Mr. Speaker.
It is obvious you're not taking any lessons from the conservatives, Mr. Champagne, because you haven't learned anything in 10 years. You're doing the same thing.
When a brief, out-of-context clip from our interview dominated the news cycle for an entire week, we couldn't help but notice how unusual it was. It was just one line from a 30-minute conversation, yet pundits clung to it instead of addressing real issues like crime or the cost of living. Now it makes total sense. Today's cost of living numbers just dropped, and they are not good.
Let's take a look. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12-month change in the Consumer Price Index, including the Consumer Price Index excluding gasoline. Now, really what this is this tracks the aggregate of prices across the economy in the major categories to tell us how much things are increasing in price month over month, year over year. That's what this is. Now, you can see that this goes all the way back to September of 2020, when COVID was, and then you can see when the Liberals spent all this money because inflation skyrocketed all the way up to around 8.5%, and then it dropped all the way down. But if you also notice, this is when Mark Carney became elected, and things have only really increased in price. So, what's going on and why were the Liberals so concerned? So this graph shows the price growth accelerated in 5 major categories when you compare September of 2024 to September of 2025. And you can also see in this graph the comparison between how things were last month versus this month. So you can see that in food and in household operations, furniture, equipment, that sort of thing. You can see transportation, and you can see recreation, and you can see, alcohol and all of that. All of that has gone up in price. Shelter has stayed relatively the same, which isn't necessarily a good thing because it's still going up in price. So what does this mean? Let's take a look at rent. So overall, in Canada, rent has gone up an additional 4.8% since last year, and the increase in the acceleration of the price in rent has gone up even since August of 2025. And you can see all the different provinces there. So when the blue dark line is longer than the lighter blue line, that means that the increase in rent has gone up faster this month, or rather in September, than August. And across Canada, the average is it's gone up 4.8%. Now, why is that an issue? Is 4.8% a lot? Well, it may not sound like a lot, but if you think about it, the Bank of Canada's target inflation rate is 3%. That's the ceiling.
That's the top, yeah.
Anything above that, the Bank of Canada says, that's not good. That's really, really bad. So the fact that we're not at 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, we're at 4.8% for rent, that's a significant increase, right? That's over 50% higher than the Bank of Canada's target. It's about almost 60%. So that's a big problem.
Well, and not only that, but shelter or housing is something that all Canadians need. It's non-negotiable. You need somewhere to live.
Right. So when you see that graph and you see that it's gone up 4.8% across Canada, there's some disturbing numbers in there because in Quebec, it's gone up almost 10%. 10% since last September. That's crazy. Ontario's gone up, Saskatchewan's gone up. There's a few places where you can't even fathom how much it's gone up. There's only one place that has actually gone down since last year, and that's Prince Edward Island. So if you're living in Prince Edward Island, you're looking to renew your rent, good news for you. Lastly, we're showing you probably the most important graph to Mark Carney. Why? Because he told everybody that his government would be judged by the cost of groceries at the grocery store. And they've done nothing but go up since he took office. And again, 4%.
That's more than inflation.
That's really high. That's really, really high. 4% in the last year. It's gone up. If everything is relatively healthy, according to the Bank of Canada, it should be below 3%.
But it's not.
So all the Canadians, including us, when you go to the grocery store and you say, things feel like they're a lot more expensive now, that's because they are. It's because they are. So it's no wonder that for the past week, the Liberals and the state-funded media has tried to find anything to talk about other than the Consumer Price Index, anything to talk about other than inflation. It all makes sense now. So it's not that we were special. It's because they knew this was coming. So, what worse report could you have than the banker, the economist, the savior of all things money related, when you have the Consumer Price Index report coming in and saying, yeah, everything's going up and it's not good. So naturally, this made its way into question period today.
He admits they have to do better. It's not possible for them to do any worse, Mr. Speaker. The reality is today we learned that inflation is again on the march. All 4 measures of inflation are above Bank of Canada's targets. 2 are outside of and above the acceptable range. Food price inflation is rising 2 times the rate that Bank of Canada targets. No wonder we have 2 million people lined up at food banks every single day. This inflation has exploded since this Prime Minister doubled the deficit. Will he reverse his inflationary deficit and taxes in this coming budget?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I think we all know in this side of the House and Canadians, math might not be the cup of tea of the Leader of the Opposition. Neither may be economics, Mr. Speaker. But let me quote one of the authority in the world, which is the Director General of the International Monetary Fund, Mr. Speaker. She said just last week, then we have countries in the G7 that are in a better position. Germany and Canada stand up in that regard, Mr. Speaker. Both Germany and Canada recognize that this is a very testing time and they need to use their fiscal space. In the case of Canada, the Canadian authorities have been very decisive in taking action. Mr. Speaker, we're doing it.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Remember when we were reviewing the Parliamentary Budget Officer's testimony and the Liberals seemed to be fishing for any type of talking point that they could get out of there? And what we said they'd probably say is, well, we're the best in the G7, even though the G7 sucks.
Well, and that's pretty much what he said. You might be, how did he phrase it exactly? It was, you might be 200 pounds overweight and comparing yourself to your friends that are 400 pounds overweight. Yeah, they're worse, but it's still not good to be 200 pounds overweight. Now, that's me paraphrasing. That's not verbatim. You can check it out on our previous video if you'd like.
Well, and he also said, but you're going to end up at 400 pounds overweight. That's the other thing that the Parliamentary Budget Officer said. He said, yeah, they may be over the cliff and you're not, but the cliff's coming up. And you're not slowing down.
Mr. Speaker, his banker friends in Washington may think that they have fiscal space, but the single mothers who can't afford groceries have no space left at all to pay for liberal inflation. This government is forcing them to spend 70% more on the Canadian Revenue Agency. Today, the Auditor General revealed that only 15% of calls get responses on time. And even if someone does pick up the phone, there's an 83% chance they give you the wrong answer. Why does this government force Canadians to pay so much for such terrible service?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Speaker, we will take no lessons from these conservatives. Trust me on that, Mr. Speaker. At every step of the way, they fought against dental care, Mr. Mr. Speaker. At every step of the way, they fought against the National School Food Program, Mr. Speaker. At every step of the way, they fought against farmer care, Mr. Speaker. At every step of the way, they fought against the programs that would support Canadians in time of need, Mr. Speaker. No one on this side of this House will tell us what to do. We're going to fight for Canadians. We're going to make Canada strong, Mr. Speaker.
It is obvious you're not taking any lessons from the Conservatives, Mr. Champagne, because you haven't learned anything in 10 years. You're doing the same thing.
That was good.
Like, come on, man.
All jokes aside, though, the reason the Conservatives voted against these social programs is because Canada cannot afford these social programs. In order to afford social programs, maybe one particular person might benefit. So in a group of people, say you have a few that are going to benefit from dental care, but everybody else is going to be paying for it. Let's take a look at the school food program. Maybe our son would benefit from him because he's going to school and would therefore get a school lunch, but the neighbors on one side of us don't have school-aged children. The older lady who's retired down the street definitely doesn't have school-aged children. These Canadians are paying into this program and not getting any benefit whatsoever, nor can they expect to get any benefit whatsoever.
And meanwhile, the lady that's retired and, she's a senior citizen, her old age pension isn't as high as she would want it to be. So she's saying, well, why don't I get more money for my old age pension? And more of my taxes are actually going for things that I don't even benefit from. This is the issue. And when you're spending at a massive deficit, you can't afford the golden toilet seat, no matter how nice it might look.
We all know the Prime Minister doesn't shop for his own groceries, so maybe someone over there should tell him what's going on with food prices. Food inflation has now reached the highest level since 2023. Fruits, vegetables, meat, even Halloween candy. Everything's getting more expensive and rising faster, not slower. The cost of living is soaring because the cost of government is soaring. The Prime Minister is spending more than even Justin Trudeau did, which means higher taxes and higher inflation for everyone who lives in the real world. So does the Prime Minister realize that his out-of-control spending mean real costs for real Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Speaker, time and again we see those Conservatives fight against policies that Canadians not only are benefiting from, but that Canadians are asking that we make permanent. Things like the school food program, Mr. Speaker, which many advocates and indeed families have praised. In fact, in my own riding, I heard just yesterday from a food partner that's working with high schools to make sure that kids get access, not just to fresh food, Mr. Speaker, but the ability to learn how to prepare it themselves. These are the kinds of things that are helping Canadian families, and every step of the way, those guys fight against it.
Exactly. Okay, so that's BS, and you know it, Haidu, because you're talking to a food vendor that actually gets paid by the high school to provide food to the cafeteria, and just about all the high schools out there that I know of, now maybe there's ones that I don't, but they all have cafeterias and they serve fries and they have food class and they have all this stuff. So this isn't something new that the Liberals have put in. This has been going on for decades.
I mean, I don't know about your high school, but the high school I went to, it was mostly fried foods. It was things that could be made cheaply, not necessarily healthfully. And the students paid for it. If you didn't bring a sack lunch and you wanted something from the cafeteria, you had to buy it yourself, which is the way it should be. Now, I don't appreciate the government saying things like, and they didn't necessarily in this clip, but they have said and implied in the past that Canadians need this program because families who maybe are getting, say, the child care benefit or whatever it is, the several $100s per month, that they're not spending that on kids. They're not sending their kids to school with healthy lunches. It's not really your job as the government to police what families are sending to school for lunch with their children.
Well, and maybe they're not spending that money on childcare, but they're spending it on, what's that word again? Rent.
Right. They're trying to keep a roof over their head. The reason that Canadians are drowning in this fiscal pool, let's say, is that the government is taking way too much of our tax money. Canadians spend more money on taxes than food, shelter, and clothing combined. And Canadians just can't keep up with this reckless spending. How much is this school food program going to cost?
The Honourable Member for Hamilton East.
Over the past weekend at Halloween events in Stony Creek, the crippling cost of living was the hot topic at my booth. New inflation data confirms all three core inflationary measures are above target. Grocery inflation is up 4%, rent inflation is up nearly 5% in the last year. Liberal deficits are driving inflation. The more Liberals spend, the more it costs Canadians at the grocery store. Will the Liberals get their inflationary deficits under control to make life more affordable for Canadians?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know where the party opposite's been, but we know where the leader of the opposition's been. He spent the last week peddling dangerous far-right conspiracy theories about law enforcement in our country. He should apologize. While he's been attacking the rule of law, Canada's new government spent the last week announcing a new suite of affordability measures to strengthen the rule of law, crack down on crime, keep Canadians safe, which will be included in our first budget. I urge Conservative MPs to speak up, stand up, call on the leader opposite to apologize. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And there it is again. It's been exactly 1 week since we've dropped that interview, and that clip was taken out of context and without our permission, and the Liberals are still going on about it. And see how they respond to our MP, Ned Curick, who made an excellent point, because we were there in Stony Creek on Saturday, and we were also participating in these conversations about how expensive food is. And the Liberals just breeze straight past that and try to bring their attention back to this 30-second clip, again, taken out of context, about what Pierre said regarding the leadership of the RCMP.
Well, even Tom Mulcair, on a recent panel, he read out the transcript about what Pierre said, and then immediately after completely misinterpreted it deliberately, because he was trying to say that Pierre has been lambasting the entire RCMP. No, what he said is that he was saying the leadership of the RCMP is the problem. And we've demonstrated that it definitely was a problem, because you have the SNC-Lavalin scandal, you have all of this stuff, and all of it is meant to distract from the problems in the economy that the banker economist genius protege boy, Mark Carney, hasn't been able to solve. So no wonder they're using Pierre as a scapegoat, because they haven't been able to solve virtually any promise they made during the election.